Archivists had watched wars for 300 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had documented the death of worlds and the birth of new powers. Nothing surprised them anymore. Nothing made them feel anything at all. They stood at the observation deck of the Quiet Witness, a ship designed for one purpose only: to watch, to record, to remember. The collective had sent archivists like in to every major conflict in galactic history. Their job was simple: see everything, judge nothing, write it down for those who would come after. Below them, the planet 7 turned slowly in the darkness of space. It was a green and blue world, covered in forests and oceans. 2.3 million humans lived on its surface. They had been there for only 60 years, a blink of an eye in galactic terms. They had built cities and farms and schools. They had made it their home. Now the Dominion of had come to take it from them. Counted the Dominion ships on their display screen: 412 warships, carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels. A fleet powerful enough to crack planets open. The Dominion had conquered 40 star systems with fleets like this one. They were efficient and brutal and utterly without mercy. The human defenders numbered 34 ships. Made a note in their journal. They wrote about the size difference. They calculated the odds. They estimated how long the battle would last: 2 hours, perhaps 3. The humans would fight because humans always seem to fight, but they would lose. The math was simple. The math was always simple. They had seen this before. Young species, full of fire and pride, standing against impossible odds. It never ended well for them. The smart ones surrendered early and kept most of their people alive. The proud ones fought and died and were forgotten. Wondered which kind the humans would be. A transmission came through from the Dominion flagship. The commander, a tall creature with 4 arms and skin like stone, spoke the words that had heard 100 times before. People of 7, you are surrounded. Your fleet cannot save you. Your government cannot save you. Surrender now and you will be treated fairly. Resist and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to respond. Settled into their chair and prepared to document another surrender. They pulled up information about humans on their screen. A young species, only 200 years in space. They had spread quickly, building colonies on dozens of worlds. They were adaptable and stubborn, but they were not stupid. Surely they could see that this fight was already over. The hour passed slowly. Watched the human ships hold their positions. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They simply waited like animals caught in a trap, unsure which way to run. Then the human response came. Unexpected words. A surrender or perhaps a request for terms. Maybe a desperate plea for more time. What they got instead made no sense at all. Music. The humans sent music. It filled the observation deck of the Quiet Witness. It came through every speaker, every communication channel, broadcast to every ship in the system, and had never heard anything like it. It started slow and sad, like the sound of rain falling on empty streets. Then it grew. Drums joined in, beating like a heart. Horns rose up, strong and bright. Voices sang in a language that its translator could not fully understand. The music built and built until it was not sad anymore. It was something else, something that it had no word for. Their translator tried to process the emotional content and failed. It simply displayed, meaning unclear. It made a note. The humans have responded with an audio transmission of apparent cultural significance, purpose unknown, possibly a ritual of some kind, marked for further study. They did not understand. They could not understand. To them, it was just noise. Strange and interesting, perhaps, but meaningless. They filed it away as a curiosity and returned to their calculations. The Dominion commander did not respond to the music. Perhaps they did not understand it either. Perhaps they simply did not care. They began moving their fleet into attack formation. The siege of 7 would begin within the hour. On the planet below, drones captured images of the human population. They expected panic. They expected chaos. Instead, they saw something strange. The humans were not running. They were gathering. In city squares and open fields, in schools and hospitals, they came together. They held each other. Some of them were crying. Some of them were praying, but none of them were running. Zoomed in on a group of humans standing outside a government building. They were ordinary people, workers and teachers and shopkeepers, old and young. They were passing out weapons, simple things, rifles and pistols and even farming tools. They were not soldiers, they had no training, but they were preparing to fight anyway. This confused In. It made no sense. These people could not win. They had to know they could not win. And yet they armed themselves anyway. They kissed their families goodbye and walked toward the defense lines. Searched their database for similar behavior in other species. They found very little. A new signal appeared on the sensors. Checked the reading twice to make sure it was correct. A fleet was approaching from the edge of the system. Human ships. Counted them. 67 vessels, a mix of military and civilian craft. Not enough to change the outcome. Not even close. They marked the new arrivals in their report and added a note. Human reinforcements detected. Numbers insufficient to affect battle outcome. Significance, inconsequential. They watched the new ships approach. They watched the Dominion fleet prepare for battle. They watched the people on the planet below arm themselves with weapons that would not save them. Felt nothing. This was just another war, just another species learning a hard lesson about power and survival. The humans would fight because they did not know any better. They would die because that was what happened to the weak. And would document it all, just as they had documented 1,000 tragedies before. They did not know, sitting there in their comfortable chair, that they were about to witness something that would change them forever. They did not know that in the days to come, they would struggle to find words for what they saw. They did not know that centuries from now, they would still wake up in the night, thinking about the music the humans sent, finally understanding what it meant. But that was later. For now, simply watched and waited and prepared to record another defeat. They had no idea what was coming. Studied the human reinforcement fleet with growing confusion. Something was wrong with it. The ships did not match. Military vessels flew alongside cargo freighters. Mining ships with weapons welded crudely to their hulls drifted next to sleek patrol boats. Spotted passenger liners, their windows still bright with light. They saw construction vessels and fuel tankers, and even what appeared to be a private yacht with missile launchers strapped to its sides. This was not a proper fleet. This was a collection of whatever the humans could find. Opened a channel to the collective's intelligence network and requested information about these ships. The response came quickly. It made no sense. The human government had not sent this fleet. No orders had been given. No military command had assembled these vessels. According to all available intelligence, the human coalition had already written off 7. The official response was still being debated in their parliament. Help was weeks away, if it came at all. So where had these ships come from? Dug deeper. They traced registration codes and flight paths. They intercepted communications and read crew manifests. The picture that emerged was impossible. These ships were volunteers. A retired cargo captain had heard about the siege on the news. He had fueled up his old freighter and set course for 7 within the hour. A mining company had donated 3 of their vessels. The crews had volunteered to fly them. A wealthy businessman had armed his personal yacht and recruited his entire staff to serve as gunners. The messages between the ships told the story. "My daughter lives on 7, one captain wrote. "I'm coming whether anyone else does or not." Another message read, "I don't know these people, but I know they need help, that's enough." A young pilot had written to his mother, "I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but I have to go. I'm sorry, I love you." Read these messages again and again. They could not understand. Why would anyone fly to certain death for strangers? What did these people hope to accomplish? Their ships were weak. Their weapons were primitive. They would add minutes to the battle, not hours. They would die for nothing. And yet they came anyway. The archivists turned their attention to the planet's surface. Their drones had spread across 7, recording everything. What they captured only deepened its confusion. In the city of New Geneva, evacuation ships were loading refugees. Women and children and elderly crowded onto transport vessels, but not everyone was leaving. In watched a young man help his grandmother onto a ship, then turn and walk back toward the city. His grandmother screamed after him. He did not look back. In a hospital on the northern continent, doctors refused to evacuate. They said they would not leave their patients. When soldiers came to force them out, they locked the doors and continued working. In a school basement, a retired soldier taught children how to hide. He showed them the safest corners, the strongest walls. He told them stories to keep them calm. When the lesson was over, he picked up a rifle that was older than some of his students and walked out to join the defense line. He was 73 years old. And documented all of this. They recorded the names and faces and actions of these humans, but they could not understand why. What drove these people? What made them choose death over safety? A phrase kept appearing in the communications that intercepted. Different people said it in different ways, but the meaning was always the same. Hold the line. The archivists searched their database for context. They found military records, historical texts, and cultural references. The phrase was old, very old. It meant to stand firm, to not retreat, to keep fighting even when all hope was lost. Humans had been saying it to each other for thousands of years. But why, In wondered, why hold a line that cannot be held? Why fight a battle that cannot be won? A new transmission interrupted their thoughts. The Dominion commander was speaking again. His voice was hard and cold. Humans of 7, your reinforcements change nothing. You are still outnumbered. I offer you one final chance. Leave this world, take your people and go. We will allow your evacuation ships to depart safely. This is more mercy than you deserve. You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal. And waited for the response. Surely now the humans would see reason. They had been given a way out. They could save most of their people. All they had to do was leave. The human admiral appeared on screen. She was an older woman with hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations. Her ship, noted, was one of the converted freighters. She had come with the volunteers. Dominion commander, she said. Her voice was calm, steady. I have consulted with my captains. We have discussed your offer. We have decided to respond in the traditional manner of our people. She paused. For a moment in thought they saw her smile. Come take it. The channel closed. And stared at the blank screen. They ran the phrase through their translator. The meaning was clear. It was a refusal, but more than that, it was a challenge, a defiance. The humans were not just saying no. They were saying, if you want this world, you will have to pay for it in blood. The archivist checked the numbers again. 34 original defenders, 67 volunteer ships, 101 vessels total, against 412 Dominion warships. It was suicide. It had to be suicide. No rational being would choose this. But the humans were not thinking about numbers. They were not calculating odds. They were thinking about the evacuation ships still loading refugees. They were thinking about the children hiding in basements. They were thinking about the grandmother who would never see her grandson again, but would live because he gave her his seat on the transport. They were thinking about holding the line. It made a new note in their journal. The humans have refused surrender despite impossible odds. Their motivation remains unclear. Their actions defy logical analysis. Further observation required. They did not know it yet, but they had just witnessed the first moment that would haunt them for the rest of their very long life. The battle for 7 was about to begin. The Dominion fleet moved like a wave of steel and fire. 400 ships advanced in perfect formation, their weapons charging, their shields glowing bright. They expected the humans to scatter. They expected fear and chaos and a quick, easy victory. They did not get what they expected. The human fleet charged and leaned forward in their chair, unable to believe what they were seeing. The humans were not defending. They were not retreating. They were attacking. 100 ships against 400, racing straight into the teeth of the enemy fleet. The first human ship to die was a cargo freighter called the Morning Star. It had been carrying grain before its crew converted it to a warship. Its captain was a woman named. She was 60 years old. She had never been in combat before. The Morning Star took 3 direct hits and began to break apart. But instead of trying to escape, Captain aimed her dying ship at a Dominion destroyer. She hit the engines at full power. Her final transmission was simple: "Tell my husband I love him." The explosion took both ships. And recorded the event. They noted the tactical value of the exchange. 1 freighter for 1 destroyer. A good trade by the numbers. But that was not what stayed with them. What stayed with them was the voice of, calm and clear in her final moments, thinking not of herself, but of the man she would never see again. The battle spread across the sky above 7. Human ships wove between Dominion vessels, too close for the larger guns to track. They fought in ways that it had never seen before. A patrol boat rammed itself into a carrier's hangar bay, detonating inside and crippling the ship. A mining vessel used its drilling lasers to cut through a cruiser's armor. The yacht with the missile launchers destroyed 2 fighters before finally going down in flames. On the planet below, the ground war had begun. Dominion soldiers landed in waves, their drop ships falling like black rain. They were professional warriors, trained and equipped for exactly this kind of assault. They expected the human colonists to run. The colonists did not run. Its drones captured images that would stay with them forever. A farmer with a hunting rifle, firing from behind a stone wall until a plasma bolt found him. A teacher leading her students through a burning building, carrying the smallest ones in her arms. A doctor treating wounded soldiers in a basement while the ceiling collapsed above them. The humans were afraid and could see it in their faces. They were terrified, their hands shook, their voices trembled, many of them were crying. They fought anyway. In the city of New Geneva, human soldiers marched toward the Dominion lines. They did not march like the professional armies that it had seen before. They did not march with perfect discipline or cold efficiency. They marched like people who knew they were going to die and had decided to die on their feet. A young woman caught his attention. She was small and thin, barely an adult by human standards. She carried a rifle that looked too big for her. Her helmet was dented. Her uniform was stained with blood that might have been her own. She was crying as she walked. But she walked forward, toward the enemy, toward the guns. And watched her take a bullet to the leg. She fell. She got back up. She kept walking. She fell again. She crawled. Another soldier grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. Together, they reached cover behind a broken wall. The young woman immediately turned and started firing at the enemy. Why? And wanted to scream. Why do you keep fighting? You are hurt. You are outnumbered. You are going to die. Why don't you surrender? Why don't you run? The answer came in the communications that it intercepted. The soldiers talked to each other constantly, not about tactics or strategy, about people. Is Martinez okay? I saw him go down. Keep moving. Don't leave anyone behind. My sister's on the ships. We have to hold until they're clear. No one gets left behind. No one. That phrase again and again. No one gets left behind. And watched a medic run into open fire to drag a wounded soldier to safety. She took a plasma bolt to the shoulder. Her arm went limp. She switched hands and kept dragging. She got the soldier behind cover, patched his wounds with her one good arm, and then went back out for another one. The archivist checked the numbers. The human fleet had lost 60 ships. The Dominion had lost 47. By any measure, the Dominion was winning. The humans could not sustain these losses. Their defense was collapsing. But the Dominion was supposed to have lost nothing. This was supposed to be easy. A report came through from a Dominion ground commander. It intercepted it and felt something strange move through them. Something cold. "The humans will not surrender," the commander reported. His voice was tired, confused. "We have captured several groups. They do not beg for their lives. They do not offer information for mercy. They only ask one thing: what happened to their friends? They want to know if their companions are alive. That is all they care about." The battle raged for hours, then days. The Dominion pushed forward. The humans fell back, city by city, street by street, building by building. But they never stopped fighting. On the fourth day, In realized something that made their blood run cold. The humans were not trying to win. They had never been trying to win. They knew from the start that victory was impossible. They were trying to buy time. Every hour they held was another hour for evacuation ships to escape. Every soldier who stood their ground was another minute for children to reach safety. Every human who died was dying so that others might live. In looked at the evacuation numbers. More than 1 million refugees had already escaped. The transports were still launching, still climbing into the sky, still running for safety, while the defenders below bought them time with blood. The humans were losing the battle. They had always known they would lose the battle, but they were winning something else, something that In was only beginning to understand. In the burning streets of New Geneva, the young woman with the dented helmet was still fighting. She had been shot 3 more times. She could barely stand, but she was still there, still holding the line. The battle for 7 ended on the 9th day. In stood at their observation deck and looked down at the planet below. Smoke rose from a dozen cities. The forests were burning. The oceans were dark with debris from fallen ships. The Dominion flag flew over the ruins of New Geneva. The humans had lost. In should have felt nothing. They had watched defeats before. They had documented the fall of worlds and the death of civilizations. This was their job. This was what they were trained to do. But something was different this time. Something had changed inside them during those 9 days of watching. They did not know what it was yet. They only knew that they could not look away from the planet below. The numbers told a story that no one had expected. The Dominion had come with 412 ships. They had lost 163, nearly 40% of their fleet, destroyed by a ragtag collection of freighters and volunteers. Their ground forces had suffered 60,000 casualties. 3 of their capital ships had been crippled beyond repair. The conquest that should have taken 2 days had taken 9. And the evacuation ships had escaped. 1.8 million humans had fled 7 during those 9 days. Women and children and elderly, packed onto every transport that could fly. The original estimates had predicted no more than 500,000 evacuees. The defense had been too weak, the Dominion too strong. But the humans had held. Somehow, impossibly, they had held long enough. In requested permission to visit the surface. They needed to see it with their own eyes. They needed to understand. The streets of New Geneva smelled like smoke and blood. In walked through the rubble, their drones floating around them, recording everything. Bodies lay everywhere, human and Dominion alike. The fighting had been fierce, personal, close. They found a hospital that had been destroyed. The walls were collapsed. The equipment was melted slag. But inside, in the basement, they found something that stopped them cold. The doctors had stayed. They had treated the wounded until the very end. When the building came down around them, they had covered their patients with their own bodies. In found a human child's toy in the rubble, a small stuffed animal burnt on one side. They picked it up and held it for a long moment. They did not know why. A Dominion officer approached them. He was a tall creature with skin and 4 arms. His armor was dented and scorched. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "You are the archivist," he said. It was not a question. In nodded. "I have been fighting wars for 50 years, the officer said. "I have conquered 12 worlds. I have never seen anything like this." He gestured at the destruction around them. "We won," he said. "We took their planet, we broke their fleet, but I do not feel like we won, I feel like we survived." He looked at In with eyes that held something the archivist had never seen in a Dominion soldier before. "Fear. What are these creatures?" he asked. "What drives them?" In had no answer, not yet. They found the young woman 3 days later. She was in a prisoner camp, surrounded by the few human defenders who had survived. Her name was, she was 22 years old. She had been a university student before the war. She had studied biology. She had wanted to be a doctor. Her wounds had been treated, but barely. She walked with a limp. Her left arm hung at her side, useless. She had been shot 6 times during the battle. She had kept fighting until she physically could not move anymore. In asked permission to interview her. The Dominion granted it. They seemed curious what she would say. Sat across from in a small room with walls. She was thin and pale. Dark circles hung under her eyes. She had not slept properly in weeks. But when she looked at the archivist, her gaze was steady. "Why?" In asked. It was the only question that mattered. "You knew you could not win. You knew you would die. Why did you fight?" Was quiet for a long moment. She looked down at her hands, at the scars on her fingers, at the calluses from holding a rifle she had never wanted to hold. "Because someone had to," she said. And waited. They knew there was more. "My little brother was on one of the evacuation ships," continued. Her voice was soft, tired. "He's 12 years old. He wanted to stay and fight with me. I made him go. I told him I would find him after." She looked up at In. Her eyes were wet. "I lied to him. I knew I would probably never see him again. But I knew that every minute we held, more ships got out. More children like him got to live." She wiped her eyes with her good hand. "I was scared every single moment. I thought about running. I thought about hiding. But then I would think about Marco, my brother, and all the other kids on those ships, and I would stand up and keep fighting. Because if I didn't, who would?" In did not speak. They could not speak. Something was happening inside them, something they had never felt before. "We didn't fight because we thought we could win," said. "We fought because not fighting was worse. We fought because we believe that some things are worth dying for. Our families, our friends, each other." She smiled. It was a sad smile, broken and tired. "Do you understand?" And looked at this young human, this small, wounded creature who had faced an empire and refused to break. They thought about all the things they had seen. The captain who rammed her ship into the enemy, the medic who dragged soldiers to safety with one arm, the doctors who died protecting their patients. They thought about 1.8 million refugees who lived because people like had given everything. "I am beginning to," In said quietly. Across the galaxy, 17 neutral systems had watched the battle. They had seen what humans did when pushed to the edge. They had seen what humans would sacrifice for each other. Those 17 systems quietly began reaching out to the human coalition. They wanted alliances. They wanted treaties. They wanted to stand with the species that refused to abandon its own. The Dominion had won 7, but they had lost something far more important. They had lost the belief that humans could be conquered easily. And in the ashes of defeat, something new was being born. 6 months had passed since the fall of 7. In stood in the great hall of the collective high archives, surrounded by the oldest and members of their species. They had been summoned to present their findings, to explain what they had witnessed, to answer the question that every species in the galaxy was asking. What made humans so dangerous? The hall was ancient. Its walls held the records of 10,000 years of galactic history. Every war, every treaty, every rise and fall of civilizations was stored here. It had spent their life adding to these records. They had never imagined that one report would matter so much. The senior archivists watched them with calm, patient eyes. They had all seen the footage. They had all read the preliminary reports, but they wanted more. They wanted understanding. "Begin," the eldest said. In took a breath. They had prepared this presentation for weeks. They had organized their data and practiced their words. But now, standing here, they realized that none of that mattered. The truth of what they had seen could not be contained in charts and numbers. So they told a story instead. They told them about the cargo captain who rammed her ship into a destroyer, about the medic who dragged soldiers to safety with one arm, about the doctors who died protecting their patients, about the farmer with the hunting rifle and the teacher who carried children through fire. They told them about the young woman who fought because her brother was on an evacuation ship, who kept standing up because someone had to, who smiled through her tears and asked if it understood. The senior archivist listened in silence. "I have documented wars for 300 years, In said. I have seen 100 species fight and die, but I have never seen anything like the humans." They paused. The next words were difficult. They changed everything. The humans are not dangerous because of their technology. Their ships are adequate but not exceptional. They are not dangerous because of their numbers. They are one of the smaller spacefaring civilizations. They are not dangerous because of their tactics, although they are creative and adaptable. In looked at the faces around them. The humans are dangerous because they believe in each other. The words hung in the air. The senior archivists exchanged glances. "Explain," the eldest said. In brought up their final analysis. It showed the volunteer fleet that had come to 7, the cargo ships and mining vessels and private yachts, the people who had come without orders, without hope of survival, simply because other humans needed help. "No other species in our records does this," In said. "When we go to war, we calculate. We measure costs and benefits. We fight when the odds are favorable and surrender when they are not. This is logical. This is rational." They changed the display. Now it showed face, young and tired and fierce. Humans do not think this way. They do not calculate the value of a stranger's life against their own survival. When they see someone in danger, they help. When they see injustice, they fight. Not because they think they will win, but because they cannot imagine doing anything else. The eldest archivist leaned forward. "This seems like a weakness, not a strength. They waste resources. They die in battles they cannot win." In nodded. They had thought the same thing once. That is what the Dominion believed. They calculated that humans would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They were wrong. The display changed again. Now it showed the aftermath of 7, the burning cities, the destroyed ships, the 60,000 Dominion casualties. The humans lost the battle, but they made the Dominion pay such a price that 17 neutral systems have now allied with humanity. The Dominion's reputation for invincibility has been shattered, and the war continues. In turn to face the senior archivists directly. The humans cannot be intimidated into submission. Killing some of them only makes the others fight harder. Every atrocity against them creates 100 new volunteers. Every defeat becomes a rallying cry. They took a breath. If you want to conquer the humans, you must be willing to kill all of them. Every last one. And even then, the final human standing will make you pay for every life you took. The hall was silent. The senior archivist sat very still. "My recommendation," In said, "is that the collective never go to war with humanity, not because we cannot beat them. We probably can, but because the cost of victory would be higher than any conquest is worth." The eldest archivist spoke slowly. "You have changed, In. I see it in you. You are no longer the detached observer you once were." In nodded, they did not try to deny it. "I watched them march into certain death," they said. "I watched them hold hands and say goodbye. I watched them carry each other through fire. I watched them die for strangers." Their voice grew quiet. And I finally understood the music. The display changed one last time. The transmission that the humans had sent at the beginning of the battle. The music that its translator had failed to understand. It was not a cultural artifact, In said. It was not a ritual, it was a message, a warning. The music began to play, slow and sad at first, then building, growing, rising until it filled the ancient hall with something that needed no translation. The humans were telling the Dominion who they were. They were saying, "We are not afraid of you. We will not run. We will stand together and we will fight and you will remember us." The music reached its peak, drums and horns and voices, all crying out with defiant joy. They were saying, "Come and see what we are made of." The music faded, the hall was silent. In looked at the senior archivists, these ancient beings who had seen civilizations rise and fall, who had watched empires crumble to dust, who thought they had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. They looked afraid. "The Dominion has requested peace talks," In said. "The humans have agreed to negotiate, but they have not stopped gathering ships, not stopped training soldiers, not stopped preparing." They thought of her brother Marco, safe on some distant world, of the 1.8 million refugees who lived because people were willing to die for them. "The humans have not won yet," In said, "but they will, not because they are stronger, not because they are smarter, but because they will never stop, they will never surrender, they will never abandon each other." The eldest archivist was quiet for a long moment. Then they asked, "What do you think will happen next?" In thought about the answer. They thought about all the things they had witnessed, the courage and the sacrifice and the unbreakable bond between humans who had never met. "I think the galaxy is about to learn a lesson it will never forget," they said. "I think the Dominion has awakened something that cannot be put back to sleep, and I think that centuries from now, species will tell their children about the humans, about the impossible things they did, about the way they cared for each other." They smiled. For the first time in 300 years, they actually smiled. "They will tell their children, 'Do not fight the humans,' not because they will beat you, but because win or lose, they will make you remember them forever." The music echoed in their memory, the faces of the fallen, the voice of a young woman asking, "Do you understand?" In understood now, and they would never forget.